Hello friends, for today's video I'm doing the last of my 3 fall-themed book recommendations, and it would be cozy and fairy tale. The first 2 we had adult fantasy recs as well as creepy and witchy recommendations, so if you are interested in those I'll have them linked, as well as other fall recommendations videos I've done in years past. I also did do at the beginning of this year a guide to cozy fantasy, as I think what people think of when they think cozy, it's different from one person to the next, and so I want to ensure that within that guide, I tried to capture so much of what people are looking for when they get into this subgenre. However, for today, because I have done that guide video, I wanted to try and find different works that fit within cozy that I didn't discuss there, as well as books that are very fairytale-esque, because I personally think fairytale-esque stories are so fitting for the fall season, especially because fae type stories, folklore type stories, they are so ingrained in the environment, in some kind of being or some kind of creature having some kind of connection to nature, and how that all ends up impacting people. Kicking it off, we have Bookshops and Bonedust. I know for a lot of people, Travis Baldry's first work, Legends and Lattes, was kind of their introduction into cozy fantasy, or at the very least, it opened up for them all the different things that fantasy really could do when it's centered on low stakes. And that one was very much about found family, getting your feet planted on the ground firmly after starting over, whereas in Bookshops and Bonedust, it's kind of like you have your whole life in front of you, and the decisions that you make for yourself and what you want out of life, the path that you want to go down. And our main character is the same character that you saw in the other, but this is more of a prequel, and you're looking at her after she has had an injury, and when she's forced to slow down and try to recover, how she ends up bonding with people. And of course, there's that feeling of found family once again. There's this very intimate sort of small town feel where you just have this person notices this person and they make a deal with them and they help them. They go to their house, one person makes food for them, and one person says, okay, well, I'll take care of this for you now. And it's just a matter of building connections with people, helping each other out, being there for each other. And it's very sweet and it's very cute. And I also think this one's a little bit of a love letter to bookworms and bookshops, which I think is also very fitting for the season. And then also, I'll go ahead and say that Legends and Lattes is of course fitting too, especially all the coffee shop smells that are described in that. Very nice for this season. Next up, we have what is going to be the only manga for this list, and that would be Ancient Magus' Bride. I do know there is an anime adaptation of this, but I've heard mixed things about the anime and how it portrays certain topics, because based off the title, it kind of sounds like when you hear bride, you think that the character is going to be someone's bride. But how they use that word is not the way in which we think of it. It's like this being doesn't quite understand human interactions. And so when they say bride, they just mean like person I will have some kind of connection to. They don't mean literally the way we think of it. But regardless, this story, when I say fairy tale being a part of how I envision fall, this has every kind of fairy tale thing that you can think of. It has dragons, it has mages, alchemists, witches, you even see a witch with their coven. It has so many different pieces to it. It's like every magical thing in one. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, anything you can think of is probably present in this. Chimera. There's everything. There's so much within this story. And you're following our main character who is deeply, deeply depressed. And she has been essentially betrayed by her family. You don't really know the full details of that, but that is something that is explored throughout the first arc of the story. And she sells herself into what is basically like magical slavery. She decides to put herself for sale just so that she can have somebody buy her and be her new family. It's really sad. And she doesn't seem like she has a whole lot of personality initially, but as the first arc is progressing, you're getting to know her a little bit more. What caused her trauma? What caused her to lose any love for life? And as she's being more introduced to the world of magic, you're seeing little glimpses of her personality come through. You're seeing her start to care about things again. It's really devastating, but quite beautiful. But also, if you do give this story a try, just know that it bounces around. It's more of like short story format as opposed to feeling like a bigger arc or a bigger, greater plot. It's just kind of we meander from one fairy tale like thing to the next. But it is deeply quite tragic and moving at times. Just know it can be kind of polarizing because of the use of the word bride, but I promise it's not it's not like that. Anyway, moving on to another thing that is about as fairy tale as you can be, except for it knows it and it's self-aware and it kind of makes fun of it at the same time. We have the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. I've described this before as you just throw every kind of fairy tale trope into a pot and you stir it all together, but then you knock the pot over and you're like, there's this story. It's so meandering. It feels like the idea of, I've described a pantser before, which I think some of you have said it's also referred to as a gardener or something like that, which I like more, but I'm possibly misremembering. But it's called something else in certain places. But the idea being there are some writers who just kind of write by the seat of their pants. They just write whatever comes to them, and then eventually they go through and they revise and they make sure it's nice and polished. However, the idea of that is what this felt like. It just felt like whatever came to mind is what we're going to put in. You know this fairy tale trope, you know this fairy tale person, you know this plot line, let's just throw it in. And it knows it, and it kind of makes fun of itself, but it also embraces it at the same time, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's really random. It is kind of almost overwritten in the sense that it's very purple, and it's very flowery all the time. But I had fun. I thought it was a fun time. And if you're looking for a more whimsical feeling fairy tale as opposed to grim fairy tale or depressing fairy tale like the last one I mentioned, then this one's going to be much more up your alley. After that, I would say sure, give the book a shot, but I am more of a fan of the movie. And that would be Howl's Moving Castle. I do think that this time of year brings out a lot of the nostalgia for a lot of us. So I think Howl's Moving Castle is a great one. And if you're somebody, maybe you like to watch these movies from time to time. Howl's Moving Castle, Kiki's Delivery Service, Totoro, they're all so cute and fun. But Howl's Moving Castle, actually Kiki's Delivery Service as well, they are based off of books, and you can definitely give the books a try. It is always fun at the very least to see the differences between the source material and the adaptations, but also just go watch the movies because they're so cute and lovely. I love Sophie. I want to be Sophie's friend. I just want to sit with her and enjoy nature by the lake and stuff. It sounds nice. And I want to be friends with Kiki. I want to work in the bakery that Kiki delivers for. Anyway, moving on. Next up we have The Spellshop. This is a newer release, and it is one of my new favorite cozy fantasy stories. You follow a young woman and her spider plant named Kaz that has sentience, and she was a librarian. But something happened to the library that she worked at, and she had to flee, and she thought she was doing this heroic deed by saving some of her books, because who could leave books behind to burn? So she saved these books, but then she realized she was not authorized to take those, and only certain people have access to not only magic, but even anything that contains information about magic, which would include the books that she took. So now she has gone back to this tiny little island that she grew up on, hoping nobody would notice her presence, and that maybe hopefully someday she can return to the library and just kind of put the books back. But of course, with small town vibes, everybody is in everybody's business with the best of intentions, and they all know she's there and they all want to help. And she's like, oh my gosh, I can't let them see the books. So she's trying to figure out a way to fit back in and protect these books, but also she's starting to realize that maybe she can use some of the information in those books to help the people in this town. And she's also really hopeful that nobody higher up within the government finds out what she's done. It's very cute. It's very wholesome. It also has a really cute found family component. It has a really cute love story component to it. So there's a lot to this to love, and there's a lot to find adorable and precious. Similarly, we have Can't Spell Treason Without T. This one I would say is more so in line with Bookshops and Bonedust and Legends and Lattes. It feels really similar to Legends and Lattes, but there's still enough about the world and the characters themselves that makes this stand on its own. The setup is you follow these two young women who are together and they want to be together, but their professions kind of get in the way, but they finally decide, you know what? We have always dreamed of living a life together and starting something. We should just go for it. And so they do, after there is somewhat of an inciting incident that really propels them toward this path. And so they're trying to find a way to carve out a little corner of happiness for themselves. And you're seeing them do this through the creation of their little bookstore and tea shop, or it's more like a library and a tea shop. It's a combination of both. And so they're trying to create this, and one of them is a very important magic user, so they still have to fulfill the tasks that are assigned to them. But the other character is somebody who is doing the best she can to protect this new property they have, to get to know people around town. And the way that they work together, the way that they communicate with each other is really delightful. It's really lovely. It was just very cute and wholesome, but it also had really cool world building. I was kind of surprised. I wasn't expecting that component to it. Next up, we have Encyclopedia of Faeries, because this is both cozy and somewhat fairy-tale-esque. You follow a young woman who works in academia, and she is determined to make an encyclopedia of fairies. And she ends up going to this remote location in the first book to try and study certain fae. And then in the second story, it's called Map of the Otherlands, and it's the same woman, same person that she can't stand in the first one, but maybe also actually appreciates and likes a little bit more than she lets on. That individual ends up being a big part of the second book as well. And on top of that, you get some other characters that join. So there's a found family component to this one too. And in it, you're looking at characters who are trying to map out the Otherlands, or the locations of where you have that cross between the world that they live in and the Fae world. I do think that the first and second books follow a similar blueprint, so there is some familiarity there. I love these two books. That is actually my only criticism, really, is that I think that there could have been a few more differences between the first and the second, but it is an ongoing series, and I very much look forward to the third. So if you've been on the fence, but you are interested in it, I would say this is a great time of year to give it a go. Last for today, we have The Lost Story. This one didn't perfectly fit my taste, but I can certainly see this fitting a lot of people's taste, and it is so wholesome. It does have some really devastating moments, some exploration with the characters and the trauma they've endured that is actually, I think, going to be very hard-hitting for a lot of people, but the interactions between the rest of the characters, the way they speak to each other, the way they act around each other is very cute. The idea is that there are these two young men that when they were teenagers, they went missing, and then they were found 6 months later, and very mysteriously nobody knew what happened to them. One of them doesn't seem to remember what even happened to himself. One of them seems like he does, but he won't tell anybody. And he does now have this very strange gift for finding missing people ever since that event. And that draws the attention of our other main character, whose sister went missing years and years ago. And so she finds him, tracks him down, and asks him to find her missing sister. And that ends up pulling these three characters together, and they may or may not finally show you what happened or where they went when they went missing. And again, I think that there are some really hard-hitting things about this story that what I'm describing right now does not really fully give you an idea, because that's the part of the story that I think discovering that was the most moving component, but I don't want to ruin that discovery for anybody. But just know it gets quite heavy, despite how kind of cotton candy sweet a lot of the rest of the story is. But that's it for some cozy and fairy tale-esque stories for the fall. Like I said, I'll have my other fall recommendations videos linked from both this year and previous years. And then if you are interested in any of these books, I'll have those in the description bar as well. But thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later.